Low quality fans of a high quality Bruins team, welcome back. It is time. The playoffs are upon us. And today, we're going to have a nice, simple, sweet, easy peasy video. We're just going to talk about this matchup against the Canes. It's a bit scary. I'm a little bit scared, but I'm confident too. You know what my motto is: unrelenting optimism. Always have confidence in the boys. Also, hilariously, in this position, it kind of looks like the Bear's just poking his head up. So that's cheering me up as I see myself on the camera there. Real quick, before we dive into this, I was kind of not going to do this, and then I was going to do it, and then I decided not to, and then I went back and forth. I don't see why not. We're going to do a bracket challenge. I'm not predicting this series. I refuse to. I feel like I was cursing the team last year by doing predictions. I've never done them in the past. Before I did the YouTube channel, it scares me. Like I don't know. My poor little heart can't handle it. So I made a bracket where immediately I was like, we're just making a bracket where the Bruins lose the series because I'm not worried about cursing them in that way because the hockey gods don't normally listen to me anyway. But if I predicted them to go all the way, I would just feel awful. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with it. But if you're braver than I am, put that in your bracket. I'm putting the bracket challenge link below and the password. It's just a private grouping. We are going to do a jersey giveaway to the winner of that challenge. It's going to be a jersey of your choice. Please, nothing crazy that I have to spend 6 months trying to find. if it could just be like a normal home or away or an alt set of whatever player you want. We're going to put a player on it too. And then it's either hockey authentic or cool hockey. We're going to figure out where we're going to order it from, whatever's most available, what your size is, everything. But we're going to do a giveaway for you because I wanted to do it this year. You guys have been so supportive and awesome. I mean, obviously with the Patreon, some people signed up for that, which is really cool. Thank you again. A lot of subscribers, everything this year, a lot of growth. It's been fun. You will have to be a subscriber to get the reward. I feel like that's a fair trade. Right? Let's talk about this series. The Boston Bruins, our beloved Boston Bruins, are matching up against the Carolina Hurricanes for the third time in 4 years. Doesn't feel like we've faced each other that much, but it has happened. Mostly because those two other meetings were very one-sided. We will have to go into their building. The majority of this, obviously they have home ice advantage. They won the Metro, a very competitive division. Not quite as good as the Atlantic, but very competitive, very good. They win the Metro by holding on to a big lead that they earned basically halfway through this season. And the Rangers made a push but couldn't quite get themselves over the hump. We are the first wild card. But I think if you look at the East, you look at the wild card teams and go, damn. I mean, that's a doozy. It is real tough if you're a first seed to look down at the wild card and to go, that's still our first round matchup. I feel for you, but I don't. Bring it on. The first game, May 2nd, which is Monday night, starting on a Monday, which is just brutal. The Canes won the season series 3-0, combined score of 16-1. We'll talk about that in a moment. The past two postseason meetings between the Bruins and the Hurricanes, 2019 and 2020, we swept them, and then we gentlemen swept them. So a combined aggregate of 8-1. Which one do you put more stock into? I'm going to argue neither. What's really interesting to me is other than just the talking heads being like, well, Bruins got that playoff experience, which Carolina has been gathering over the past couple seasons as well. The models for like advanced analytics, the prediction models and such, a lot of them have this series being very close, and some even have us as the favorite, which I don't fully understand, but there is a lot of those models take into account recency pretty heavily. And in the past 2 months, you could argue that the Bruins have been the better team. The Hurricanes have been no schlub, but the Bruins have been on a tear since January. I think it's something to consider. Those models, though, I think for most of them, you sit there and go, this is a coin flip. And I'd be very surprised if it went less than 6 games. Here's how we match up statistically on what we put together throughout the season. The Canes, for goals for, were 9th in the league. They were top 10. The Bruins, 15th, for a particular reason we're going to get to very soon. Goals against, Canes were the stingiest team. first. Bruins 4th. This is going to be a very difficult game through the neutral zone. There's going to be a lot of possession tactics, but not a lot actually getting through to the net if these stats hold true into the series. Shooting percentage. One of the biggest reasons that a team that is possession heavy and takes as many shots and everything that we are is still middle of the pack in goals for is we were 30th in shooting percentage. Below 9%, I believe. The Canes, for shooting percentage, ended up being 13th. That's a massive, massive difference. Because all the possession in the world doesn't matter if you can't put it in the back of the net. And we've seen that all year, where you get real frustrated because you're making a goalie look real good because you're just not finishing. You're just not finishing. So that's going to be something to definitely look at. Each are middle of the league on power play, but the Canes have the #1 penalty kill. They like to call it a power kill because basically what they do is they toss out a bunch of really fast guys rather than your big, heavy, get-in-the-way guys and have them sprint and put a ton of pressure on the actual 5 players trying to move the puck around. They force mistakes with their speed, not with their size. And that actually kind of is a lot of what they do 5-on-5 as well. If you look at those season stats, you'd probably give the advantage to the Carolina Hurricanes. I just don't see why you wouldn't. They're ahead of us in most categories. But it's close enough where you can also still go, you know what? Let's see what happens. Both of these teams play the majority of their games against Eastern Conference foes that have some very, very good teams. So I don't think you can look at anything like we did the year before and go, well, yeah, but they had kind of a pluffed up schedule, easier matchups, da-da-da-da. I don't think that's an option this year. Let's talk about the season series we had with them. A lot of people are putting a lot of stock in the 3-0 sweep that the Canes had with us, and the sweep wasn't even really close. They blew us out a couple times. They shut us out multiple times. It was tough sledding for the Bees against the Canes this year, but there's a couple fun facts that we are going to go over. Firstly, Anderson started all 3 of those games, and he was incredible. He ended up, between all combined, with a .990 save percentage, 2 shutouts, and an assist. The guy was real good. Real good. The first game of the series was probably his best. I believe it was in October this year. He had 3.7 goals above expected. Grizz Carlo was the only pairing, line or pairing, which was the same as what they'll see in the playoffs. That game would end 3-0, but the Grizz Carlo pairing had a 70% expected goals percentage. Now, we did just talk about, well, it doesn't mean anything if it's not actually the 70% of goals, if it's just the expected percentage. But these numbers still do mean a little bit. That pairing was very good, and they're going to have to deal with it again in the playoffs. The Bergeron-Marchand-Pasta line was caved by the Stahl line. That Stahl line is going to be a big difference maker. We're going to talk more about them in a little bit. 80% expected goals percentage for the Stahl line throughout that game. Our top line with our best dogs got completely shut down. On the other end of that, though, the Aho line, Svechnikov, I know they haven't been running this all season, but Svechnikov, Aho, Teravainen had a 15% expected goals rate in this game. They got absolutely mollywhopped. We did not allow them a shot on net while all 3 of them were on the ice. It was an absolute shutdown of that line. And in this game, the game that I believe out of the 3 games the Bruins should have won, the reason they came away with the dub is Anderson was incredible. Like I mentioned, a 3.7 goal save above expected. He could not do anything wrong. This was our closest meeting with them. Game 2, I believe this one was in February. It was a 7-1 beatdown. This game was never competitive. Rask allowed 5 goals in the first period before he was pulled. This was part of his attempt to come back and realize that he was not healthy enough to do so. He had 1.5 expected goals against, according to Money Puck. You can see how those numbers don't add up. This game was a lost game immediately. The only lines/pairings that were the same as what they'll be in the playoffs that Carolina saw was Hall, Haula, Pasta, and Forbort, Clifton. The Hall, Haula, Pasta line was really good. They had the majority of the scoring chances when they were out. The Forbort, Clifton pairing got smoked. Aho line went wild on this one. 63% expected goals percentage. Anderson, again, impeccable. And let's talk about Game 3 real quick. Lost at 6-0. There was no Bergeron, Marchand, or Lindholm. This was Just not a game. Again, the only lines as pairings that were the same were the Hall, Howla, Pasta, who had a 75% expected goals percentage, and Forbort Clifton, who got tuned up for 2 goals against and a 30 Corsi percentage. That is brutal. I know I'm tossing out a bunch of these numbers. I think they are important, though, when you look at how these lines played against each other. You can go to Money Puck to get a better explanation of how these work. I'm going to link Money Puck below because that's where I do a lot of my research. I use Natural Stat Trick as well and a few other sites, but those are the ones that I mainly go to. So when I went through this season series, I learned a couple things. First of all, win the Aho line matchup and you'll have an advantage in the game. In the games that we got smoked, the Aho line was just going crazy. So we have to shut them down. I honestly assume that we're going to have a lot of Coil line versus Aho line action. I don't think we have a 4th line steady enough to be a real shutdown line. I think it's going to be 3rd versus 1st, and I think they're comfortable with that. But if you can put the pressure on that line, I know they roll, and I know Carolina has a lot of scoring up and down the lineup, but that's the big one. Those are the big dogs. Easier said than done. Everyone's going to talk about that line. Everyone's going to talk about the mismatches. And yeah, if you can shut down the other team's top line, you're going to have a better time. I'm not saying anything crazy with that one. Slavin, though, I haven't really talked about the Carolina Hurricanes defense. He is going to be somebody that you have to just live with. And I've mentioned this a little bit on the podcast. Slavin is going to get his, and he's going to rock our shit all series long. He's that good. And there is nothing, and I mean nothing, you can do to prevent that. He is going to get his. Just be comfortable with it. It's one of those things where you have to be comfortable. It's like in the NBA when you watch Giannis tune up the Celtics for fucking, God, that was awful today. You just have to live with it. You go, he's going to get his, and if he can put this team on his back and beat us, we got to live with it. He's going to be an important person to watch, but you need to find mismatches elsewhere because you're not winning that matchup. Another thing I learned about this matchup going back is that the coaches were comfortable trying a few different things with their line combinations, and a lot of times you would see them sacrifice their lower lines against some of these bigger dogs, the Aho line and the Bergeron line. The way it worked for Carolina, though, is they would take their bottom 6 and they would short shift them, 45, 50 seconds, all energy, go at these guys, make them feel you, make them feel the presence. Whereas the Bruins would allow these minute 20, minute 30 shifts and let them work through it. Let them learn their opposition a little more, put more time into their shifts. I kind of like the Hurricane strategy there. They're fast. They empty the bucket on every shift. But I think you will see these sacrificial lambs at times in these series where you're sending out the bottom 6 and you're just hoping that they hold water better than the opposing teams. I'd be very curious because in game 1, that's what happened. But in game 2, I'll be very curious to see if they do a Aho Bergeron, offset those lines, see whose best is better. Because in game 2 of the season series, that's what they did, and the Aho line was better. Game 3, a solid effort by all lines, I thought. Going back, checking it out, every bounce went their way. This was just we got speed bagged in that game, and we didn't have enough scoring to really put the pressure on them. And then possession kept coming back in our zone, and man, everything just went in. I would really throw game 3 out. I really don't care about that one. But the big note I'm taking here is the short shifting on the Kane side, just to keep pushing. But the more you short shift, the more chances there are for a bad line change. Keep your eye on that. Last thing I learned going back to watch the season series. There is a very wrong narrative going around that the Bruins didn't put any pressure on Anderson in those 3 games, that we never got into the interior zone. We never made him make a big save. It was completely incorrect. If you go back and watch those games, he had a lot of big saves. And yeah, he got to play with a lead, but I don't think you should knock his performance based on how loose he got to be because he already was up by 3 goals. He was very, very good. And we put a lot of pressure on him through large portions of those games. He ended up, through the season series, I think there was 9 point something expected goals against, and he allowed 1. That's really, really good. That narrative is completely incorrect and lazy. Lastly, I feel like I've rambled on about this. Lastly, the important factors of this series. Ullmark and Swayman have 0 playoff starts between them. 0. They are a tandem going into this. Olmark, I can guarantee you, starts game one. I don't know why they're being so held back with that information. Olmark's your starter. And if he falters, Swayman comes in. The playoffs are a different animal. Do I think these guys can handle it? Absolutely. But an interesting thing that came up, and when Cassidy was talking about it in the media interviews, he was talking about, does this guy have the stamina? Neither of these guys had to carry the workload for a section of the season. And in the playoffs, you're starting every other day for, if you go a couple series, for weeks. You just keep playing. We haven't seen either of these guys have to do that. It wasn't something I was thinking about until Cassidy said it, and I just went, fuck. That's a really good point. I don't think these are professional athletes. I think they have the stamina. But it's a mental fortitude to be able to keep cruising through a long month and a half of the playoffs, as long as you keep winning, obviously. I think that's something to keep an eye on. And how fast do they move to Swayman if the wheels come off? Do they go to Swayman in game 2 if Olmark looks shaky? Do they wait a couple games, let him feel it out? Do they go to Swayman even if Olmark has been okay, but they need more? I don't know. I think you give Olmark the first 2 starts. I think you have to do that, and then you go from there. Freddie Anderson, hobbled by a lower body injury. He's supposed to miss at least a game of the series. We'll see how many he misses. It gives us a better chance to win. Rant is good. The defense is stout, so we're still not going to be putting up 4 or 5 goals on him. But Anderson is huge. Huge for them. If he misses an extended portion of time, we have an advantage. We do, and we can't take that lightly. Key factor, the stall line. They crush anyone downhill of them. They're not tuning every line up for a bunch of goals, but they are completely stifling lines defensively. If we throw a line out with them and just sacrifice whatever line it is. Now, you can't just put them up against just anybody because they will get theirs. They can do that. They're very good possession-wise. But if you throw out your first line and they match it up with the stall line, the first line's not doing a lot that game. They're just not. They should be considered top 5 in the league as far as shutdown lines in my book. Go look at their numbers a little bit. You go look at their gameplay, their structure. That line is very, very scary. Howla. You wouldn't think this is important, but Howla is hated by this franchise. And Marchand is hated by everybody, but he's one wrong move for a very lengthy suspension. It's not Marchand's job to get under this team's skin this series. It is Howla's. There was some, let's call it discourse when Howla left. I think he needs to embrace that. I think he needs to finish his checks and be vocal out there. See if you can knock someone off their game a little bit. The Marchand thing with the suspension, he's got to play a clean way. He has to play cleanly. Because if we lose Marchand, we lose a series. Or the next one. Like, we lose any matchup without Marchand. He's irreplaceable. And that's also kind of goes, not the irreplaceable part. Freddie's also a guy to kind of take a look at there, too. Where one stupid move, they're going to call him for anything. They know him at this point. Freddie's going to be an important factor staying out of the box as well. It all boils down to one thing, though. You need to find one mismatch. If everyone does their job, the goaltending doesn't fall apart, the defense keeps their structure. If this series is as even as I think it can be, then it's going to come down to finding a mismatch. If you sacrifice the Bergeron line and the Aho line, then the second line, Howla, Pasta, Hall, they need to create a mismatch with whoever they're going up against. If Stahl's the line that they're going up against, they get shut down, that third line has to win their matchup. The problem is, we roll 3 lines, and it feels like they roll 4. Finding that mismatch is not going to be easy. But if this coaching staff can find one area to exploit, just one, then we really have evened the series up. DeBrusk staying on that top line and being consistent up there is extremely important. As soon as you start shuffling that right side around, the chemistry between those lines go into whack, and there's no mismatch on the ice that you'll be able to find. I guarantee that. I'm not making a prediction on the series, but that does it for me. I just want to talk it out a little bit. I feel like I'm cursing if I make a prediction. The only thing I'll predict is it's going to be very tightly fought. It's going to be closer than the season series. God, I hope so. God. It should be a good one. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little anxious. Of course I am. It's playoffs. We could be playing Arizona in a playoff series. I'd still be fucking nervous. It's just the way I am. But I love this team. I think we have a chance to do some real damage. And the path through the Metro is preferred over the path through the Atlantic. So let's see it. Talk to me down below about what your predictions are for a few series. You'll be able to see my bracket, I believe, from the... Maybe you won't be able to see it right away. I'll post it. I'll post it in the video right here so you can see my bracket. Again, I put the Bruins losing to the Canes because I just can't. I just feel like I'm cursing it otherwise. Go Bees!